I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson Sarah Dyke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to speak for the Liberal Democrats in this motion. Around 10 million people live in rural areas, and the rural population has been growing faster than urban areas since the mid-2020s. However, under successive governments, rural communities have largely been viewed as an afterthought in policy. Yet rural areas present a wealth of opportunities which need to be optimised, because if the government really wants growth, then rural areas should and can play their part. After more than a year of uncertainty and anguish since the 2024 budget that threatened to wreck family farms across the country, the government have partially climbed down on the family farm tax. This concession is down to the continued and sustained campaigning of the thousands of farmers who didn't give up and made their voices heard. These voices I know because they are family members, friends, and they're my neighbours. I have stood in solidarity with them as they took precious time away from their farms to attend Westminster rallies in protest of this ill-thought-through policy. For them, this is not a triumph. This has been a hard-fought fight to save their livelihoods, their homes and their futures. This fight is about the justice and security, because if we undermine British farmers, we undermine our ability to provide food to feed the nation, to keep us secure in a volatile and uncertain world. Britain is not secure unless food supply is secure.
I wonder if the Honourable Lady could weigh on that point.
Yes, of course I will.
I entirely endorse what she said about the family farm tax and the campaign that was waged against it, which cost actually a number of political parties. Will she go further, though, and now join the campaign that's certainly raging on our side of the chamber against the imposition of huge solar plants and pylons of substations on prime agricultural land? 35% of the land in this country is not of that kind. Surely those things should go there.
Thank the right honourable gentleman for his intervention. Renewable energy is absolutely vital for the future of this country. However, we must ensure that renewable energy is placed in the right place and is fit for the future. Putting renewable energy on best and most versatile land certainly isn't the way that the Liberal Democrats would look at it. However, there is places for renewable energy, and I certainly endorse a lot more solar on rooftops, and that is certainly something that we can do for the future. I thank him for his intervention. Going back to the family farm tax, the impact of this tax has already been felt. Chris, who farms at Wheatlawn Farm near Babbuckery, wrote to me recently. He's a fifth-generation farmer. He has terminal prostate cancer and described the family farm tax as a dark shadow which has been hanging over him for the past year. He was terrified of leaving his son with a huge unpayable tax bill. But while the financial burden might be avoided for now, Chris was still keen to point out that what little trust he may have had in the Labour government, it's now been lost because, in his words, the Labour Party simply doesn't understand the countryside. Ministers are fond of saying that British farming is the best in the world, and they are right, but too many of them don't know why. The reason, Madam Deputy Speaker, is because of farmers like Chris and the tradition of family farming in the UK. So while common sense has finally prevailed, does the Chancellor recognise the damage this whole dreadful episode has had on the rural economy? And when will the Treasury publish an impact assessment of this policy on the agricultural sector? Because while the partial climb down has limited the damage to the industry, it doesn't eradicate it entirely. Many farmers will still find themselves facing huge tax bills while operating on narrow profit margins. And we Liberal Democrats were the first party to call out and oppose the unfair family farm tax after the disastrous 2024 budget, and we will continue to stand alongside the farming community and demand that the government scraps this unfair tax in full. And if they refuse, we will submit amendments to the Finance Bill to bring it down. So alongside food production, farmers are the guardians of the countryside, but they can't be green if they are in the red. They are critical to meeting DEFRA's legally binding targets to reverse nature's decline. So they need time to adapt and clarity about what to aim for profitable and nature-friendly farming. So as the government prepares its new farming roadmap, we Liberal Democrats encourage them to make it practical, not theoretical, because the UK should align with our partners in the EU. And given that the EU is maintaining direct payments to farmers until the cap until at least 2034, we need to ensure that English agriculture is not an outlier, especially given that Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are also retaining an element of direct support. While farmers in England are left with agri-environmental schemes that under a Labour government are no longer comprehensively open to farmers, because it's the first time in 80 years that a government has not provided support to produce food. Now, this is Tory policy. It's been continued by Labour, and it's absolute madness to disincentivise food production, so that I hope today, perhaps, it's the opportunity for the Conservatives to apologise for failing to treat food as a public good. Madam Deputy Speaker, we need to ensure British farmers have a fair deal. And we can do this by adding an extra £1 billion to the farming budget, guaranteeing high standards in all future trade deals, and renegotiate the Australia and New Zealand trade deals, enforcing point of origin and point of production labelling on animal-derived products, and giving the Groceries Code adjudicator the teeth it needs to both protect customers and producers, and securing frictionless trade with Europe through new veterinary and plant health agreements. I will give way.
Thank you for giving way, and I think rather than just criticising the government, I think it's great that she's outlining a set of policies that the Lib Dems would take forward to support farming communities. But what's not clear is how these would be funded. So that list of policies you listed there, can you talk about how much it would all cost, what the impact on the economy would be, and how they would be funded?
For his intervention, the Liberal Democrats have set out a number of different policies to help shape that £1 billion investment into, and being part of the customs union would certainly be part of that. But that would bring in billions of pounds extra, as he well knows. And there's much more that we can do. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, nothing has done more to increase the cost of living, the cost of farming and the reduction of farm incomes than the Conservative botched Brexit, which made it more expensive and more burdensome for British farmers and fishers to export to their main markets in the EU, beleaguering their workforce and undermining their protections for animal welfare and the environment. And so began a dangerous precedent set by the Conservatives in government for future trade agreements in what they negotiated and how they went about it. They stripped away parliamentary scrutiny and forced terrible deals through which gave unfair advantage to imports from countries with poor standards over the higher quality standards of British farmers. Liberal Democrats... Yes, I will.
Thank you very much for giving way. We've heard an awful lot of criticism about the government's policies towards farming. Very little mention from the Conservatives about the trade deals that they secured with Australia and New Zealand, which have made things so much harder for farmers. But you'll hear a lot of that from Labour, no doubt. I wonder if my honourable friend will join me in asking the government to commit to rejecting chlorinated chicken and hormone-treated beef from the United States.
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and I totally agree with him, as he would expect. Liberal Democrats want to ensure British farmers operate on a level playing field, and that they can succeed. And that is why last year, I introduced the Dairy Products and Dairy Farming Bill. We have seen farmgate milk prices plummet over the last few months. Now cereal prices are also under serious pressure. Liberal Democrats are clear. We need fairness in the supply chain, because when farming businesses fail, there's a knock-on impact to local hospitality, pubs, cafes, restaurants and hotels. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, Somerset is a tourist region. It supports nearly 10% of all jobs and contributes over £1 billion to the regional economy. Many of the fantastic hospitality businesses in Glastonbury and Somerton are under immense pressure as they face huge rates increases from April. Madam Deputy Speaker, Miranda contacted me today. She manages the White Hart pub in Castle Carey and faces her rateable value going from around £19,000 a year to over £30,000 a year. So while the British Institute of Innkeeping state that only 1 in 3 pubs are profitable, they've warned that this could drop to 1 in 10 by April. The hospitality sector already faces a £4.5 billion in additional taxes due to the increased NICs from the 2024 budget. But the Liberal Democrats have been calling for an emergency 5% VAT cut for hospitality accommodation and attraction businesses until April 2027, funded by a new windfall tax on big banks. Combined with our policy to reduce people's energy bills by removing the main renewable levy, we could put £270 back into people's pockets, making it more affordable to heat their home and allowing them to spend more on occasional extras. This would help drive economic growth in rural areas, restore our high streets and give the country a much-needed morale boost. It would also help rural areas to grow the economy. Madam Deputy Speaker. Yes, I will, my honourable neighbour.
I'm grateful to my neighbour for giving way. I share with her the idea of seeing a reduction in VAT for our rural hospitality sector. But does she not get the irony that such a reduction would be illegal if we were still a member of the European Union?
But I think the cost-benefit of being in the European Union far outweighs. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, going on to homes, to help grow the economy, we also need to ensure rural areas have places for people to live in. In Somerset, newly built homes make up just 3% of all properties recently sold, with an average price of 20% more expensive than the UK average, while rural house prices have increased by 57% since 2013, while wages simply stagnate, creating an affordability gap and contributing to a higher need for affordable housing in rural areas than in urban settings. As a result, many first-time buyers and key workers simply can't afford to live in rural areas, making it increasingly difficult for rural local businesses to retain staff, reducing local spending power and threatening the viability of our rural communities. The Liberal Democrats are clear, both the private and social housing markets are too expensive and insecure, with the current provisions simply not being sufficient to meet demand. People in holiday destinations shouldn't have to face higher rents and housing shortages, especially when they are among the hardest hit by the cost of living crisis. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Tories would offer tax cuts on second homes, making it harder for the people who want to live in an area that they work or where their family are from to own their own home. This simply evidences their failure to understand what life is really like in rural areas. So, as a part of a fairer housing system, Liberal Democrats would allow councils to increase council tax on second homes by up to 500% if there are housing shortages in their area. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, Liberal Democrats believe the government must recognise the pressure that they themselves have put on rural communities over the last 18 months, whether it be the family farm tax, the broken agri-environment schemes, the lack of support for hospitality and the failure to provide affordable rural homes. But we must remember these are not new problems. The Conservatives failed to make improvements for rural communities, and that is why they were kicked out amongst the huge swathes of the rural southwest. Thank you.